Hello again. So, to our credit hire debate. Having done the odd credit hire during my career, and having been around when the GTA was first set up, I couldn't resist hosting this debate. We could have made this session just as we could have made the telematics session last all afternoon, but we're going to try and stick to three key areas in this debate. We're going to look at the legal landscape over the last 12 months and right now. We're going to look at the current climate and the OFT investigation into the credit hire market, and we're also going to look what the future of the GTA looks like. So, perhaps unsurprisingly, I struggled to get an insurer to sit on this panel today. I don't know if any of you insurers in the room want to take the opportunity to join us now. But personally, I think that's quite representative of how the scales have tipped in favour of the credit hire organisations over the last 12 months. So, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce to you today's panel. Firstly, we have a man who I respect and admire, despite not necessarily sharing the same views. I once saw him introduce himself at the Post conference as the devil incarnate. Please put your hands together for Lucifer himself, Mr. Steve Evans, the Chief Executive.
Which one's plugged in?
Wherever you feel most comfortable.
This one here.
Next, we have a new kid on the block. A man tasked with picking up where the great Tony Baker left off as captain of the CHO and the voice of the credit hire industry within the GTA. Please welcome Mr. Martin Andrews, the Director General of the CHO. And last, but by no means least, we have our legal beagle, a man who's passionate about the industry and at the forefront of the claimant legal industry. He's the Deputy Chair of Mass, and like me, a straight-talking northern. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Craig Budsworth, partner at Glaiysers.
That sets a dynamic then, doesn't it?
Okay, guys. I've been out in the industry for 3 years, so to kick us off, please, if you could all give us a snapshot, and a minute or so, just sum up how you think the credit hire industry is right now. If we start with Steve.
It's been quite quiet. Not much happening. We're as dysfunctional as ever, apparently. You'd be hard pressed to work out that all bar one major insurer, which we all know is AXA, subscribes to the GTA, and we probably successfully managed to handle about 500,000 claims a year, to do so in a spirit of compromise and collaboration. The GTA Technical Committee is working well to achieve what we need to achieve, and I guess the big issue is people believing, and I'm saying this from an insurer perspective, people believing that there's still a better solution to all of this through the courts. The ludicrous waste of money on the 2-year saga that was Darren Bent demonstrates that nobody's really in the market for changing the law.
And surprisingly, we will touch on that.
Yeah. And we've got Balotelli in a car at the moment, so I can't wait. He keeps appearing in the Daily Mail, which is brilliant, about this new car that he's bought because his own car was damaged, and it's better than a telematics device for us. Because we know the car's okay, we know where it is, and we know he's got his girlfriend with us, so he's not going to get movement.
You touched on 500,000 claims there, Steve. For me, that's been the market size for quite some time. Is it saturated? Is everyone doing it? It's just moving around between different suppliers?
I don't think the market's saturated. I think the biggest move was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when insurers started to play the game, recognising the referral commission opportunity. And I think, therefore, enterprise have probably taken a bigger stake of insurer-led business from it. We've not seen the consolidation that everybody expected. We have seen economic factors, I think, come to play, a few hundred miles and all that rubbish. But I think the market is pretty much a static marketplace now, and customers are either getting mobility because of the body shop, or because of the insurer intervention, or because of credit hire, depending upon where they drop at the right time in the cycle.
Absolutely. And Martin, I appreciate you've not been in your current role for that long. How do you see the industry?
Well, it is the hardest industry one could hope to do business in, isn't it? Just put some metrics on it. The credit hire organisation has 110 members, 45 of which are associate members, so that would include lawyers who have a secondary interest in credit hire, it's not their primary business. So there's 65 credit hire companies, I'd say 25 of which have turnover $1 million, and 5 or 6 of them have turnover over 25 million. And these small amount companies can create all this fuss against the might and the lobbying power of the insurance industry, which of course has been going on for years and is a big beast to try and compete with. And so it does feel a bit like David Goliath versus Goliath. We do keep reminding ourselves who won that battle, I suppose. So it's an extremely difficult place to do business. I think anyone in the room who's involved in it knows that. I've been to, 4 GTA meetings, and the meetings, if you like, are representative of what's on the table in front of you here today. The credit hire members compete to want to go, and they're limited to 6. The insurers have 6 faces, and maybe 3 go, and it's the same 3 faces. The faces that are there are keen, and I think acknowledge the benefits of it, but why are there only 3 there? And why is the level of representation of people who are there not higher than it is?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think if we look at where the GTA was born from an insurer perspective, in those days it was a gatekeep, a very technical market. Now claims in itself has become a lot more entrepreneurial. The underwriting sales side of it's kind of all on the internet. And I do personally think that the insurers would be served well if they did bring some of the higher echelons over onto those committees that you talk about. That's not to, disrespect anyone that's currently...
No, absolutely not. It's not a comment that way. And I'll cover some other threads around that during the course of today, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. And how do you see it, Craig? Making loads of money through all the litigation, I guess?
Never stop making money. Love it. Support. No, perversely, I love the GTA. And what I'd almost like to see is me out of a job for trying to enforce hire agreements that insurers don't pay. That would be great. I think one insurer came on record last year to say if we pay every presented payment plan within 30 days, we needn't employ any staff and we could save money. Brilliant. That's what the GTA at heart should be about. That's better for everybody, better for insurers, better for consumers, better for credit hire organisations. That's the way it should be.
Absolutely, and certainly from the work that I've been doing, we are seeing some insurers embracing that, the biting the bullet on claims that if you gave it to a technical guy, he could perhaps defend, find a way of saving a day here and there. But the cost of doing that and the time that's taken actually outstrips the GTA rate, which, as we'll come on to, the course of, proving are very reasonable.
Very much so. On that point, the GTA is really about trust. And insurers seem to have lost the trust of credit hire companies. Yes, there's fraud. Credit hire companies are normally, there's the odd bad egg, but they're not involved in the fraud element. They've been stung as much as everybody else. Yeah. And if we get rid of the fraud element, then actually the GTA might be an even better product.
Well, Ian highlighted to us in the opening presentation, there's a lack of trust between the consumer and the insurer. Ian's work's all about the consumer, but if we bring the supplier in, I'm pretty sure all the suppliers in this room, whether it be repairer, car hire company, credit hire company, you're right, that lack of trust applies even when you're in a partnership. So I think that's something the industry could do better, full stop. So, if we stick to the legal landscape, but bring things right up to date, perhaps the most intriguing episode in the credit hire market ever, from my experience, is the autofocus story. Now, this has been described as the single biggest abuse of the civil justice system. It's seen companies fold, it's seen share prices collapse, it's seen crime, prison, and stories of corruption. It's like Dallas and Dynasty rolled into one. Steve, as the man who's had the balls and resource to fight this fight, I appreciate it's a subject you can probably talk to us about all day. But just give us a brief overview of what's happened, what impact it's had on your business, and where you think it's going to leave Accident Exchange if justice is done.
Justice is being done already, and I think the evidence of that was Lord Justice Moses on February the 1st, 2012, when he ordered that the file be sent to the Attorney General for the Crown Prosecution Service and City of London Police to determine the basis for an investigation for this perversion of the course of justice and the terrible things that went on. We were a public company, and so everybody will have seen the headlines, because one of the pleasures of being a public company is that whenever things go wrong, you have to tell the world. And there's always more things going wrong than go right. And so from 2009, I guess, every one of our announcements was about the damage being caused as a consequence to judges believing that whatever was being peddled by Colin McLean and his bunch of motley fellows was the absolute and whole truth. It cost us the thick end of £57.5 million in, I guess, profits. It cost us 300 jobs, some of which may have gone because of the recession. It cost us a position whereby we became perceived as adversarial because every one of our cases, so probably 6 or 7 out of 10 of our cases were not being settled within the GTA, which is the sensible place to do this business, but was being pushed to litigation because insurers, as a consequence of the evidence from autofocus, were peddling the story that you'll get a better deal in front of His Honour Judge, whoever it might be, if you make these guys string out and wait for a year. So the damage it did to us as a business was pretty material. I think the damage it did to this trust between what the GTA was about was also pretty material. And the damage it did to, I guess, the civil justice system generally, and specifically the way mobility claims have been perceived by the courts and by the Daily Mail, have really done everybody a disservice.
And the material losses to the business, do you see down the line any recourse or compensation or way back for that?
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got, I've done deals so far with 16 insurers, totaling about £8.5 million of claims. So that's a good day. Might get a holiday this year.
And I just heard one insurer saying they're on the way to settling your claims down there before. So it's starting to look better.
It's a strange, bizarre position that I'm in, because I do sell myself as a devil incarnate because it was my fault. And I was with an insurer yesterday, I know he's in the audience today, and I say to them and I say to everybody when I sit in front of them, this is the very rare occasion when I'm going to stand here and say I've got the moral ground. People will listen to what I say, will broadcast what I say, and will publish what I say because you guys were in the wrong. So I'm making the most of it.
I was just going to say, make the most of that while it lasts.
And then you can kick 7 bells out of me like you have done for the past 17, 20 years or whatever it's been later on.
Absolutely. Craig, we've seen some of the people from Autofocus who were arguably just doing what they were told end up in prison. Is there any chance that the people involved in instructing them, if proven to be tinkering with the evidence, could suffer the same fate?
Massively so. I think I would really be uncomfortable in shoes of any, whether it be solicitors or insurers, more importantly solicitors, if they've gone to Autofocus and asked them to deliberately amend their evidence, then that is a massive, massive breach of a legal trust. Where you're not just going to get battered by the SRA and maybe struck off at a fine. This is criminal. And it's criminal on a massive, massive basis. And if I was in those shoes at the moment, I wouldn't be sleeping well at night.
Luckily you're not.
Thank God.
If we bring things up to date in the current climate, the LFT investigation into a number of areas of the market does seem to have honed in on the subject matter of credit hires. Martin, the CHOs met with the LFT. How did that go?
Well, I took over the role full-time on the 1st of January, and I guess I took over an organisation that up until the autumn of last year was not exactly head in sand, but it was hoping, never a good strategy, that the referral fee ban wouldn't get extended into credit hire. We just kept quiet about what credit hire was. And that may or may not pan out. We'll talk about that no doubt during the process. But the whole thread of trying to get access, me to get access to justice, and me to get access to the OFT, me to get access to MPs on the Transport Committee, is quite difficult. I can demonstrate that, if you like, by the fact that the OFT put out their initial call for evidence, I think, on the 23rd of December. I think Christmas was just about to happen, and there's only X business days before you have to reply. And ultimately, it's a criminal offence to not reply with full disclosure. That initial call for evidence was not well thought through. As an example, to comply with it, each credit hire company would have had to basically give a copy of every single email it had ever produced, because it was so extensive in its demands. Second example, and I suspect you know I'm going to say this, but when the Transport Committee put out its report in early January, Jack Straw appears on Radio 4 the very next morning. So he's clearly been primed with an agenda that I question, because I think it was Ian, the first speaker, talked about consumer protection wins elections. Well, it doesn't when it comes to credit hire. It's a very blunt example. So anyway, the Transport Committee put out its report into its initial findings on why motor premiums are going where they're going. And it very clearly lays the blame, right or wrongly, on the rising cost of personal injury. The word credit hire was not mentioned in the executive summary at all. I think it first appeared on page 14 of the report in a kind of a passing context. And yet Jack Straw, within 15 seconds of his interview on Radio 4 the next morning, starts describing the appalling practices of, and you've got a bit garbled here, so-called credit hire companies and so-called innocent parties to motor traffic accidents. That's a scandalous thing to say. To the point where the BBC had, and they only did it because they had, to give me the right to reply, where I appeared on the programme the next day, straight after Thought for the Day, which, by the way, wasn't in the job spec when I agreed to do the role back in the autumn. But I got a fair hearing, if you like, and at least the right to reply in a public environment. But the organisation anticipated that it may well have to up its game in terms of trying to protect the consumer rights, because at the heart of this, contentious language maybe, but people would rather the innocent consumer to a motor accident did not get a nobility because it costs someone money.
There's certainly nowhere as near as contentious as some of the things Jack says.
And the innocent victim to a motor accident is a consumer once every 7 years with a 70% accident rate, whereas the consumer buys the policy every year. But it's articulating to people who ought to listen and getting access to those people has been consuming a lot of my time over the last 5 months. MPs on the OFT. Now, the OFT were ill-informed, uninformed, and it's an extremely complicated market to get across. And when you get a 1-hour meeting with the OFT, it's very difficult. We met with the OFT last week, and I know there are other people who were party to that meeting. I had, and I know most of the representatives had, 5 business days notice that that meeting was even happening, and 2.5 business days notice of what the agenda was, and no advance notice who the attendees at it were going to be. So it is that sort of starting point that we're in.
And credit hire is a fairly complex subject matter. In the part of the first inquiry, I had a couple of calls with the OFT myself, and I was pleasantly surprised at how quickly they had grasped some of the challenges in the industry. But I was very, very disappointed with the first output in terms of the report. You know, they certainly, for what my half an hour was worth, hadn't listened to a blind bit of what I'd said. Not that they necessarily should do, but I was really disappointed in that. How do you think the inquiry is going to end up? Because clearly, I guess, Craig, more relevant to your world, it's running in parallel to what the MOJ is doing. And the one thing that the OFT did pick up on very early, even though they were told to leave personal injury alone, in many parts of the world, it's interconnected. How do you think things are going to pan out, Craig?
I once gave a speech about the Jackson reforms, and my starting point was, it's all a load of shit, all been written by a government that's going out and nobody's going to care. That was 2 years ago.
That's my straight talking northern for you.
How wrong can you be? So trying to second guess the OFT will be difficult. I think my concern is the perception of the OFT that it's all too much, and because referral fees are paid, similar to the MOJ's point on referral fees on personal injury, that there's therefore too much cost involved and the cost needs to come down. Referral fees, the Legal Services Board did a really good study into referral fees and came to the conclusion that the referral fees within the industry, all areas of the industry, is actually positive for the consumer because it drives up levels of service. And so, similar with credit hire and credit repair, because it is tied in here, the OFT are looking at labour rates as much as hire rates. And if they're looking at it and say, okay, Jack's £300 a case on a credit hire case, that's a referral fee. If that came out of the cost of credit hire, that would reduce insurance premiums. That's not straightforward. It's not like that. We've got to wake up and understand the full impact of what would happen to the consumer if referral fees came out of all aspects of the market. But I think that that's the way it'll go.
But I guess there's an element of deja vu here. So 12 months ago at this conference, less than 12 months ago because we did it in June last year, the whole prospect of banning referral fees, my presentation was around, well, if you do that and you don't change the costs, the industry doesn't benefit at all. and the money just goes, you know, into your pockets in that particular case, Craig. My old boss used to dream of the day when referral fees were banned, but GTA rates were maintained and insurers carried on referring massive volumes of work to us because they loved us and enjoyed the customer service. I never really thought that that would happen, but where we sit today, I guess it could. Steve, you know, what's your view on the subject of referral fees in credit hire now that LAPSO hasn't banned it, but could ban referral fees?
I'll probably just go back one stage to what Martin was talking about, what the competition issues are and where the OFT focus, because we went along. It was ever so funny when we went on to this meeting because we didn't know who was going to be there. We walked in reception, there were 16 or 18 people there, so it was more than we thought was going to arrive. And then we got taken down in a lift to the bowels of the OFT, where there was no daylight at all, down these very long corridors and into a room where we were expecting to see tarpaulins on the floor and washable walls. Because the anticipation was that, you know, led by the devil incarnate, that we were blameworthy for all the 93% increase in insurance premiums that we've seen in the last year, and that therefore we were going to get a kick in. And so we took a fairly robust approach when we went in, and it became very clear early on, I think this is an important point just to grasp, that what the OFT are currently wrestling with is not whether credit hire is good or bad, or whether referral fees in credit hire is good or bad, and they articulated this to us. What they're wrestling with is some very large insurers who get paid commissions, who get parts commissions, who get referral fees of a greater scale or lesser scale, who get the ability to influence the direction of travel of the consumer, which disadvantages some of the smaller insurers who normally would be entrepreneurial and driving price, which makes a more competitive marketplace. So the concern was how dysfunctional and how much this money's trawling around, and credit hire was just a sliver of that. So I guess my view is that having heard that from the OFT, I felt a bit more relaxed about the credit hire concerns. And then looking at LAPSO and the referral fee issue and the ability of the Lord Chancellor, subject to statutory instrument, to be able to declare other referral commissions unlawful, the thing that became very clear at the meeting was we had an insurer there who said that the OFT needed to understand that the commissions that they got went absolutely to frontline service to make sure the consumer was aware of his rights, his entitlement, and was protected throughout the journey of the accident, and that if the referral fee issues were banned, it would impact materially on those percentage of consumers who have an accident. And there was a concession then from the OFT that it's really more complicated than ever we thought.
Yeah, and that sort of understanding the breadth of the debate, right from, you know, very first time we brought Jack Straw to the market, it's clear, you know, the knock-on effects and the unintended consequences. Yeah. They're learning as they go, and, you know, the chances of getting it all right in the timescales that they're talking about, you know, to suit Mr. Cameron in the election, yeah, in my view, no chance at all. Let's just go back to the Darren Bent case, because for me, Darren Bent, I mean, it's interesting that both you and Allianz claimed it as a victory. Interestingly, the chap from Allianz that did claim it as a victory is the only person that's ever gone on record to say what we're doing with Battle of Claims is stupid. So we'll put that down as a coincidence. Darren Bent, for me, pointed the fact that GTA rates were reasonable, because if I'm right, you got paid more than the GTA. Impecuniosity out the window, because Darren Bent clearly has got a few quid. Equally, mitigation. So it kind of, you know, put you in a very strong position from a legal standpoint. Martin, I heard Steve say shortly after that for God's sake, you know, the GTA is a sensible place to go now. We've got this piece of paper in our hand. What are your thoughts on that, Martin? You know, do you see Bent and the current climate as a real opportunity to inject some life back into the GTA?
I'm not sure Bent is the GTA catalyst. Just on legal cases, I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I've not done 20 years, but I would just say to everybody, when you read legal cases on credit hire, you've got to be really careful what it is you conclude. That both claims victory point, because the legal tactics that go on and the points that are either picked or not picked in a particular case means that a credit hire company might be quite willing to let a small point look like a defeat, because there's another way of better attacking it. So just express caution on that. And I think the autofocus, how many times have I said that within the last year or so? The autofocus events should be the catalyst for the GTA. been reborn, having more investment in it, and when I say investment I don't mean money, although more money would help. The whole of the GTA process is run on 100 grand a year. So there's not a whole lot of financial resource put into it. The independent chairman, again, has just recently changed, second time in 6 months. So the intellectual capacity to understand what credit hire is all about and to lead and run it. But it's the emotional and intellectual investment in the GTA that is missing from the insurers. And I can well understand why that is the case, because my version of the history events, and the winner gets to write the history books, right? But my version of the history events is that autofocus was moving to insurers, supposedly reasonably, because in court cases across the land, time and time again, the rates were being shown to be supposedly excessive. So why would anybody invest emotionally and resource-wise into the GTA? But it was all fabricated, which you all now kind of know. So I'm expecting the GTA to be the solution. When you brief MPs in the OFT, they gravitate towards the GTA as being the solution. The major danger, and I'm conscious of that, I'm trying to, but the major danger, and I highlighted this to the OFT, is that whether they refer or not, and the question is what are they going to refer, because it's not credit hire they're referring. They said repeatedly in the meeting that the insurance marketplace is dysfunctional, fine. Doesn't mean the credit hire piece is, so it'll be interesting to see what they actually do or don't refer. But the big danger in the short term, whether they refer or not, is that in any press release or any report that they put out, if they talk about referral fees, which at the end of the day got nothing to do with the value of credit hire claims, it's a slight difference to personal injury. If they make any reference to personal injury, they've armed the government or chancellor to use that as the basis for reasonably extending the ban. And they can do that either knowing that's the case or not realising that's the case.
Absolutely. We saw last week or the week before an article around the future of the GTA talking about a portal. That's something that I personally have been a fan of for a number of years. I think it gets a number of issues out of the way, helps transparency, potentially give you MID access behind it, take the need for audit and all the arguments around that away. Craig, as a lawyer, you've probably, 2 years now into using the MOJ portal, very experienced on the credit hire. Can it work for credit hire?
I'm with you that it sounds great. Sounds like the perfect solution.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what the RTA portal sounded like. Sounds like the perfect solution. 40% of cases fall out. 40%. That's astronomical.
Yeah.
Why did it fall out? Because most of the time insurers can't get their acts in gear to be able to make a comment on liability without just being working days.
No different to the G.
Submission following your payment pack. So at that point you've also got all the repair duration and the initial notification time to consider their position on liability.
So you've got every argument you need.
Everything's there. Why shouldn't we pay? Why don't we pay credit hire through the current RTA portal? You know, we put this on. Here's the payment pack. Within the process, to the insurers, please pay it on an interim basis. I know it's excluded because it's vehicle-related damages, but why not? Why not deal with that now, within, as the portal suggests, or the protocol suggests, 10 working days for a reasonable request for an interim payment, or 15 days if that request is over £1,000. Why is that excluded now? Why should it be?
Well, makes common sense when you say it like that. A little bit pressed for time now, so just to wrap us up before we take a couple of questions from the audience. Moving along the panel and starting with you, Craig. If you could wave your magic wand, what would you do over the next 12 months to improve the state of the credit hire market and relations with insurers?
I would try and persuade the insurers to deal with payment packs within 30 days.
So speed, just
speed.
Do what
It's all about
on the
speed.
cap.
And release information on fraud.
Martin?
Well, I think the OFT report will start to push the direction of the outcome. And if they aren't negative on the referral fee aspect, I would hope that the GTA becomes something that could become even more of something. Because you could link credit hire membership into GTA membership. You could legislate that GTA membership had to be a requirement of credit, of being involved in credit hire at all. And because I do think the credit hire, the GTA, sorry, is the way to give insurers not direct control, but comfort that the control is taking place over a claim to minimise repair periods, which we get accused of maximising for our own benefit all the time. So we'll see how it goes.
And Steve, if you had one more magic one left.
Well, I'm more optimistic than everyone else, I guess, because I do think that the GTA portal is a bloody good idea, because we've got 6 insurers, we've got the support of the voter focus group with the ABI who want to go and deliver it. So if I had one wish, it's that these rate investigators never, ever, ever blight the horizon again, allowing insurers to engage solicitors, to engage in hostility and aggravation, but we focus on doing the achievable things that we can do in a committee with collaboration.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. If we turn to the audience now, do we have any questions from the audience?
Go on, you want to.
Go on. Oh, one at the front.
There seems to be a buzzword with telematics at the moment. What view have you got with telematics in the credit hire industry? What influence is it going to have?
We've stuck £500,000 into telematics over the course of the last 6 or 7 months to try and get us to a position of understanding what's what. And I had a conversation with Ian before coffee, because we did a lot of research in the States, and the States is the biggest market for everything. And if you look at what's going on in the US, pretty much in everything that in my business life has happened, if it doesn't work there, it probably won't work here. It's not working there. And the reason it's not working there, and this is going to come as a real big surprise to those of you who are in insurance, people don't like you. You know, the survey showed it. I buy my insurance because it's cheap. I don't want to be quoted happy or do any of the other things, apart from the meerkat, which I think are quite good. I only buy insurance because I'll crush my bloody car if I don't, and because I have to therefore have it. And the issue about telematics being in the gift and control of insurers, when the clear evidence that we've got, initial evidence I'd say, that consumers don't trust it, leads you to question whether or not the consumer experience is going to be solved by anyone else. And the prize winner for me in all of this is going to be the manufacturer. They own the car, they own the brand relationship. You sit on the toilet if you're a bloke when you bought a car and read the Autocar magazine to find out how good it is. You believe in a BMW brand. And if that manufacturer says, we want to love you, we want to look after you more, we want to help you find where your car when it's gone, we'll help you after an accident, you'll go for it. And I can see a big disintermediation going on in this channel. And I don't believe that the insurance proposition with 20, 30, 40,000 out of 28 million consumers insured is going to be driven by a little black box. And even better that David Cameron thinks it's a good idea, because we all know what a twat.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Thank God for that. Right, please put your hands together for our panel.